Hey guys, welcome back to the White Shed Customs channel. Today we're going to do a video on how to remove the gauges in your 2007 to 2013 Harley Davidson Street Glide. But first, we're going to go over what tools we need. Alright, so first thing I need is just a 3/8 ratchet, nothing too fancy. Extension, something decent. 5/16 wrench, 5/16 socket, a T27. I'm using a socket. You can either use like a T handle or an Allen wrench style, a pick, and a screwdriver. And that should be all the tools you need right there to do the complete gauge removal, as long as yours is still a factory bike like this one is. But alright, let's get started. So first, we're going to remove your outer fairing. You have to remove your windshield bolts along with this one right here, right below the mirror, on both sides. Alright, so we're going to start by removing these two outer ones. And then we're going to go ahead and do the center one. And then we're going to pop the windshield out, just like so. We're going to set this off to the side. And then we're going to put the one center bolt right back in to hold the fairing on, so that way we pull the other ones out. So we pull the other ones out, that the fairing doesn't just drop to the ground. Now once you get all those out, you can come back to the front. As usually I try to hold it with my leg, just put some pressure on it so it doesn't fall. You're going to pull that one right back out. And then you're going to tilt it back some, just enough to where you can get in here. And you go ahead and unplug your headlight. And then that's your outer fairing that's removed. So now that we have the outer fairing removed, you can see all the gauges that we're going to be removing. Now you can do this without cutting this zip tie, but I just go ahead and snip that zip tie, and then you'll be able to pull that down out of the way a little bit more, and it just gives you that much more room to get to these plugs in here. And then this is where that pick comes in handy. So you can get up in here to this plug, and you can kind of just push over on that plug a little bit. Yeah, unplug the gauge. And pull that back out of the way a little bit. And then you have these two screws down in here. They're just the standard Phillips. You're gonna go ahead and unscrew those.
And this one.
And then this backing plate is gonna come right off this gauge here. Put that off to the side. And then you take the gauge and put a little bit of pressure on it. And it should just come out the front. And that comes right out the front. And then you have your speedometer out. And then we're basically just going to repeat that same process for your tack gauge. Go ahead and unplug it. And I like to get the wires out of the way a little bit. And then you can go right back in and hit those screws.
I just push the wire harness down some, just so you have to cut the one zip tie, so you're not in here forever afterwards, cleaning up, trying to get the wires back where they were at.
So you just pull out that backing. Set that off the side. And then, like I said, just gonna grab a hold of the gauge and push it around just a little bit, enough for the pot. It comes out the front side. It's been in there for a while. You can see they have this nice gasket on there. That seals it in there. Sometimes they get stuck, like these ones were the original gauges from 2007. But then that's that one. Alright, now we're on to the volt gauge and the fuel gauge. And it's basically the same process. You're gonna pull your light out. That one just clips in. And then you can just go ahead and unplug it. And you can throw that light away if you're doing what I'm doing and send them out to Ohio Custom Gauges. You unplug it. And then this is where that ratchet and socket comes into play. Because these ones have little nuts on them. There, go ahead and pull those nuts off. Just like so. And that would be the nut right there. And there's two of them on these ones. And just like the other gauges, you just pull this backing plate off. So as you move the wires out of the way enough. And you can push the gauge out. And there's a volt. Now we're on to the fuel gauge, and we're going to repeat that same process. You're going to go ahead and unplug the light. And then you're going to unplug the gauge. And then you get these two nuts again. You can go ahead and push the gauge out of the front, attach the backing plate, and now we're on to the air and the oil gauge, which they're very hard to see down in there, but they're just like the fuel gauge and the volt gauge. They just have the two nuts, and they have the plug for the light and plug for the gauge. So what you're going to do is you're going to unplug them both. And the one nut you can get to with the ratchet. The other nut, you may get to it with the ratchet if you have enough room. Which I do not, because of the fairing mount. So that's where the wrench comes into play. This is your 5/16 wrench. I have a ratchet wrench, so I can go right from the side and you can get it from that way. And then you just pull the nut off. And then just like the other side for the air gauge, the oil gauge is the same way. You're gonna have your fairing mount right in the way. So you're gonna need the wrench to get that one right there off. And then you can use your long extension, socket, and ratchet to get that one off. And usually as soon as you get these, broke free, you normally can just get in there with your fingers because they're only finger tight, as you can see. And make it a little bit easier for you that way, so they're not super tight. So when you get it broke free, you can use your fingers to get it off that way. I dropped mine, but this is I'm using one hand because I have the camera on the other. But then you're just gonna go ahead and pull the other one off with your long ratchet extension. And you're gonna get right down in there. And you get all the way down in there, your long extension and ratchet and socket. So you go ahead and pull that one off.
I'm unfitting from the gauge. But that's fine, we can put that back in.
So then once you got both of those nuts off, you're just going to go ahead and pull the gauge out. And there are the oil gauges. So that's how you remove all your gauges. And now that they're out, they're ready to be boxed up and shipped to Ohio Custom Gauges.